Live from the 607, it's the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour, where we're talking everything movies, TV, comics, and entertainment. Join in the conversation on social media with the hashtag ODPH, because here we go.
What's up, comic fans? Welcome to another edition of FLZ Presents, powered by FanlightZone.com. I am your host. My name is Rich. I'm also the executive producer over here at Fanlight Zone. And today we have a very exciting book and creator to talk to. And let's just put it this way. If you have not seen this book at the LCS, I don't know how you miss it, because when you take a world that's, the drug-fueled 1980s, and you mix it with a crime boss, kind of like Miami Vice in a way, we'll say, but then you add in the majestic and huggable, yet dangerous animals from the animal kingdom known as hippopotamuses. Oh boy, you have something on your hands. And that something, of course, is the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre. And if that name alone doesn't make you want to read the book, I don't know what else will, except for we have the creator and writer of that book here to kind of let you know what it's about. So without further ado, he is, you know him as a radio host. He's also a comic book writer, most importantly for this show. And he did a little bit of business on this book right here. And of course, the writer of the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre, fearless Fred Kennedy. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good, man. That was an illustrious introduction. I hope I can live up to
it. We try to do big introductions, and usually Ken's the introduction guy. But since I was in here, I was like putting the pressure on myself. I'm like, I got to make it sound even bigger. However, listen, there is no way to dance around the catchiness of this book. Like, I'm going to ask you a minute how you came about this, but I just want to start off. And I know I told you a little bit off air before we came on, and I want to say, we get solicits, peek behind the corner, we can all look them up. You see what's coming out, but when you're reviewing comics, you get the list and you're like, and it's usually a month or two in advance, and you start going, okay, what would I be interested in? And all of a sudden, like me, I love indie comics. We'll probably talk about that later. I come across this book title and I'm like, is this real? Is the first question. And then I hit the synopsis and I'm like, oh, not only this is real, this is directly up my alley. And I was like, this is genius. And then, of course, I've read it. I'm a big fan, not just saying that because you're here, because I do. I love the book. But how did this all come about? How did you come about landing on the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre?
Well, I was actually texting with my buddy Adam about it. Adam Gorham is one of my closest friends. His run on the Hulk right now is gonzo. But we did indie comics together for years. And then we were just batting ideas back and forth. And what was interesting was it was right when Dead Romans was coming out from Image. And so we were talking about, he's like, well, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And then I had mentioned an idea about dinosaurs. I wanted to do a story with dinosaurs, but dinosaurs is the protagonist. And then he was talking about the situation with the hippopotamuses in Colombia from Pablo Escobar. And then we just were joking around about goofy ideas. And then eventually, I stuck with it. I kept thinking about it. And then I messaged him I know you're busy. Can I just do this? Can I figure this all out? And I had known James for a long time. And I always liked James. And so I loved his art. And we'd hit around some ideas about what to do together. And then some ideas, we really had different takes on how to move forward with them. But then I messaged this one, and we were both really on the exact same page with what we wanted to do. We wanted to do an over-the-top 80s action movie, but a comic, but also that was a PSA for kids about why drugs are bad. And he really bid on it, and I really bid on it. And then we just sort of batted around about where to go. Because the initial idea when I went to James was a little bit different than what it is now. The root, the cause, the momentum, and the characters all had the same names and stuff, but the way the story was going to be executed was a lot different. Initially, the amusement park was part of a mansion, part of a big drug lord compound. It wasn't at an amusement park, and it was from the Righteous Gemstones, where they have the amusement park on the compound. That's what it was supposed to be. But then we didn't even make a discussion about how, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We just changed it as we were putting it all together. But yeah, like the process was really fluid. A lot of conversations back and forth about moving this here, moving that there. And it was funny because like while we were working on it, I was thinking of it as a one and done, that's it type of story. But slowly over the course of working with James, is like, no, man, we're building like a ridiculous superhero team is how we're addressing it. The Laser Drug Force, which will really come into its own in the final issue. As we've been working on it, we basically created an origin story is really what we're doing at its core, you know?
Yeah. I love how it just snowballs. It's like, hey, here's this wacky idea, and then it's just like, wait a minute, there's something here, and that's just awesome to hear. But like, listen, I gotta say, the title says it all. So for anybody who's on the fence, like, let's be honest, the title says it all. You get all of that in it. But I'm gonna hear from you. For anybody who might not know what the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre is, what's the elevator pitch for the actual story?
The elevator pitch, and like the pitch is, there's an amusement park that's a front for a drug lord, and when the feds move in to bust it, everything falls apart, and to get away, he dumps all this experimental cocaine, Coke 45, into the hippo tanks. So then you've got the feds trying to arrest the guy, you've got coked up hippos all over the amusement park, and then a hurricane rolls in. It's absolute pandemonium, and it doesn't stop. But you could really get into like even deeper than that, but I think that that's the core of what it is. And when you start to list all the elements at play, it feels daunting, but it all flows very naturally. It all sort of like rolls out like a carpet, you know? My favorite part is when you've got this idea that it's just this bust, and then you hear the sound of that like sports car in the distance. And then in rolls Miguel Senecoza, who's like the worst protagonist ever, but he thinks he's the best. Only matched with his awfulness by Special Agent Clark Nebraska, who is also the worst. So yeah, like it's ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous story, but it's been so fun to do. And I think we need some more funny these days, you know?
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest draw here is, and I agree with you. It seems on the surface that there's a lot going on, but it's actually easily digestible. Like there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of things, but you don't miss anything. Like, cause like when you're even describing it to me and I'm just sitting here like reading, I've read every issue going, oh, you know what? No, it is really easy to follow. You really get into like this groove of like, and it is like the worst. Like they're the team that thinks that they're the best, and they are the worst at their jobs, period. Like there's a reason why they just keep dropping the ball, but you will never see them admit to it. And when they do something good, it's almost by happenstance. It's like, oh, we fell into it. Like, you know, I don't want to spoil anything, but read it. Trust me, you'll enjoy it. And you know, the book, you can't help but know it has that like nice retro 80s style feel to it. I did kind of say a Miami Vice of sort, which that doesn't really describe it too well because it's got it like you said, it's almost like if the bad like in a different way, it's almost like if the Lovable Losers or the aim of the A Team met Miami Vice, because they're not quite, you know, they're not quite the that caliber, but you know, why was it the setting? Why was that like an important part of this story?
Well, originally the setting was so the original setting was in downtown Columbia. That's where like the original setting of the story was. And then it just sort of like evolved from there. We put it in Florida because 1980s Florida, all that stuff. And to be honest, that was a very like easy switch, and it had nothing to do with Miami Vice actually. It was all because of Narcos Mexico, the beginning where it opens up in Florida. The special agents are in Florida, and then they get looped into going down into Mexico and whatnot. So the original idea it was just it could have been anywhere, but it just happened to be Florida. And it just like it just evolved. It became more Florida as it went along, and we leaned into it, and it wasn't a conscious decision. It was Florida. And then we just kept pushing more and more and more and more. Because the original, it could have been California too. Because there was a few sources that I really leaned into. The biggest one was Point Break. That's like Clark, Nebraska, Johnny, Utah. That comes from Point Break. Originally, Clark, Nebraska was like a superstar football player And then we made Clark a woman because James was very leery about having too many dudes and then having the dudes fight women. Like it just, he goes, it's not going to look good. He's not a good look. And he goes, and also from an aesthetic point of view, it makes the book more fun. And so there was an immediate, the real only like we have to discuss this was when we made Clark a woman. We both were on this exact same page of, we're not going to do the cliche, Miguel's a wild loose cannon and she's by the book and keeps him in line. We were like, no, absolutely not. We're going to make them almost competing about who's worse, who's the worst. And my thought process was, when you watch The Naked Gun, like everyone on the whole city thinks Frank Drebin's like the worst, but all of the cops think they're the best. So we wanted to also make our protagonists like everyone thinks they're the worst, but they think they're the best. You know what I mean? Like they're the best it ever was, So we really wanted to lean into those like lampoon satire ways. And The Naked Gun specifically was a big influence for me. All the Abrams brothers, like, I love silly, man. I love silly. And the Abrams brothers, like Airplane and The Naked Gun, were like my favorite movies. Like growing up, like I remember watching The Naked Gun in the theater and having like an asthma attack. And that was where I really wanted to project. But Frank Drebin is only funny because he's so serious. He's only funny because of how straight ahead he plays everything straight. There's no, I'm not making a joke. He's the coolest guy in the room. So when it came to making Miguel, I based him on Tequila from Hard Boiled, from Chow Yun Fat. Like he's Tequila. And in the original opening, because there was like 8 pages before the opening, like that became the beginning of the book. There was 8 pages leading up to that. And there's the scene in the opening pages where it shows the drug dealer giving the drugs to the kids and they're like, can turn any small town into fornicating socialists. Yes, that was actually, that was a scene that was the opening of the book. That was the very first scene where Miguel rolls in and beats up these drug dealers in front of an elementary school. And it was this like over the top, like he's brutally beating them in front of kids. And the kids were like, yeah, they're all cheering. And then after he's done, he does like I don't know how much longer I can do this job. These streets never get clean. Like all those lines. And he goes to this, we called it like a robo jazz bar. And it was basically like Chuck E. Cheese, but there was an animatronic jazz band playing. And then he goes and he plays jazz with the animatronic jazz band. That was it. And then he gets the call that his brother's gone missing. And then he goes to Disco Hippo Wonderland. But we cut that scene because we wanted to like get to the action faster, get to the main story. And we've percolated all those elements through it anyway. So yeah, I kind of give you a long-winded answer about like the goofy process and influences of all that stuff.
That's fine, but that's awesome because you really do kind of like when you're saying the influences, like knowing all of these stuff, seeing Airplane, being a fan of Airplane and the Naked Gun movies, it is really kind of that like almost on the nose, dry humor. And that's what makes it funny because at no time do you think either one of the main characters is actually like you as the reader are in on the joke. You understand that them being serious is you going like, wow, they're terrible. Like they're absolutely not good at their jobs, but yet they're having a pissing contest of who is better. And it's really not who is better. It's actually who is worse. So in the reader's position, you're in on the joke. Whereas in the way it's written, they're not. They think that they're the greatest agents and the greatest police officers to ever live. And it's so funny because it gives you that seriousness. Jumping over a little bit, because I know you mentioned it, working with the artist James Edward Clark on this. Fantastic job, by the way. The art looks amazing. It matches the story perfectly. Like you sometimes you look at something and you can just like you can see like, oh, there may be a clash of ideas. Not here. It looks like how you're reading it and how it looks amazing. And I know you kind of mentioned the creative process with I wouldn't say a pushback where you guys had one little conversation, but how has been that creative process between the two of you creating this?
It's interesting because we argue about everything. Like we're arguing about everything all the time. But the thing is it's never like you're wrong. It's like, no, this works. No, this works. Well, let's do this. Okay, da 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 da. And it's this big like collaborative process where we're both in on the ground floor and we're both pushing our ideas, and then we're compromising on what we're going to do as we go forward. And I've said this a few times that both of us are very aware that we couldn't do it without the other one. Like there's elements that he's bringing in and then elements that I'm bringing in, and I'm constantly trying to make it sillier and he's constantly trying to make it more like gritty grindhouse, but in an over the top way. You know what I mean? So it's that collaboration and that collaborative nature of the story that makes it work the way it does. I've been a fan of James's stuff for years, like Pissant Apocalypse, Evil. It's funny because like you take a look at the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre, and a lot of times people don't get it. They're just that I think they're looking for something else, and it is not that. And it's a pretty out there kind of book. You know, I don't think it is. James doesn't think it is. He's always saying, he goes, this is like my mainstream stuff. If they can't handle this, they could not handle the other stuff that I'm doing at all. Because like we're both fans of like Philip K. Dick and all that, like, you know, sci-fi stuff. And he's really channeled a lot of those elements and weird out there stuff into his work. And then when it comes to this, we're both kind of like, I want to go out here and he wants to go out there, but then we meet in the middle and we created something I think is very unique, and it stands out on the shelves a lot. In fact, I think like issue 2, the cover on issue 2 is like one of the greatest comic book covers I've ever seen in my entire life. I'll die on that hill. As soon as he sent it to me, I'm like, dude, this is insane. I love it so much, you know?
Oh, I think that the covers, and I will be showing some art throughout this. I'll be making sure that we put it up so you guys at home can see some of this. But the art, like as far as the covers, are phenomenal. I even like the alternate covers. I'm a big, huge Akira fan, so issue 1 had an homage to Akira. I thought that everything is just like, if you don't notice this on the shelves, you're just not paying attention.
Yeah,
like this is the kind of book that it doesn't even need to be in like the eyesight, like the eye line. It could be on the bottom shelf. Hopefully it's not, but it could be on the bottom shelf, and it's literally going to catch your eye. It really is. If it's not the title, it's literally the art, because I think you guys have done an amazing job of selecting and making some great covers for this as well. But I have to I'd be remiss if I didn't say, because we're talking about characters. One of the first characters that you get introduced to is for those of us who are a little that know are a little older. It's kind of a fill-in for former First Lady Nancy Reagan.
Yes,
as the first lady. And because of course Nancy Reagan was famous for saying just say no, so I'm assuming that's where the influence goes. But then 100%. To the next level, how fun is it to write that character, honestly, as like a narrator of sorts?
Oh, she's awesome, because we all like, I'm in my 40s, man. I grew up in that era. That's the world that I lived in growing up. And the whole thing when she's like, you bunch of soft-boiled potatoes, like the way she's dumping on all the kids, like that was like the way it was. I remember having like dare cops come into the classroom and just chirp you. And like, they'd be like, oh, you're terrible. Like, and there was no nurturing. There was none of that. And it was this constant, like angry, ranty stuff that you were getting thrown at you all the time. And that era, like, oh man, like I was a military kid and I grew up on a military base in Belgium in the Canadian section of the school. And we would always do stuff with the American kids. And we went to do dare at the American side of the school. And you grow up with this constant rah, 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 rah. And it's different than the rah, rah, rah today. There was like, the only English channels I could get were BBC and AFN, the Armed Forces Network. And anybody that grew up as a military kid in Europe, it's this TV channel, and you would get like North American TV, but it would usually come like a month or two after it had been broadcast in the States. And there was no commercials. It was all PSAs. So it was all these PSAs. And it was, don't do drugs, don't drink and drive, don't gamble, join the army, be all that you can be. Like every commercial break would have a recruitment ad for either the Army, Air Force, the Marines, or the Navy, like every single one. And then they'd have those like, it's a fact in the Library of Congress. Do you remember those? Were those actually even on in American TV? Because like
they actually were.
Yeah, we have in Canada, they're called like Part of Our Heritage. And there are these little vignettes about things that have happened in Canada. And then there's like, it's a fact. And so like that era of TV really fueled like what this is. Like the Mr. T, Nancy Reagan, don't do drug, fool. Like I remember seeing that constantly. So that was an immediate, this is going to happen. Nancy Reagan is the narrator, but her name is Mandy Laser because Ronnie Reagan, like from Star Wars, that's what they call him, Ronnie Reagan. So Mandy Laser became that. And in the initial version of the story, and I pitched this, but we decided it was too hard to do. And it was a one joke and we were worried we were going to ruin it. But the initial idea is that the whole story, like periodically there'd be VCR tracking lines in the middle of the panels, like interrupting things. But then we decided like, that's just one joke and it's not funny to do it again. So we threw that aside. So we just have it straight up. She puts the VHS tape in and then the story moves along. Yeah, that's like, but she was an immediate, that's happening decision. That was the beginning, the very first draft. Yeah.
As somebody also in my 40s grew up, in the 80s and 90s, like the PSAs and stuff, and that just hit completely. So I'm like, I remember those PSAs, and yes, we definitely did have them on TV. I remember all the don't, just say no and don't do drugs, and this is your brain on drugs, and it's kind of like wild, like. And then to see that in the form and then in the narrator, if you will, it is even better because it's like, it's just turned all the way up. And like, it's not lost upon you that she's talking about drugs while getting hammered and smoking. Like, like it's kind of like one of those, like, oh, this is hilarious. And then when you were talking about Dare, I got real sad because I was like, man, I just found a Dare shirt. And I was like, I should have wore the Dare shirt. It was the perfect opportunity. I dropped the ball on that. And now everybody knows that I dropped the ball. I could have just wore a Dare shirt instead of a Bucky shirt, but that's a whole nother different story. But yeah,
no, I was just gonna say I have a Dare shirt too, but it is ratty and falling apart. Like I can't fit into that thing anymore. Yeah.
All of us could have worn Dare shirts. There we go.
So like exactly. I remember we took the Dare pledge in front of this like giant, terrifying like drill sergeant type guy in the school with like the classic round hat tilted forward, like. I remember doing it and it wasn't like, yeah, you did it. It was like, that's right, you did it. That's right, you did it. And it's like, okay, all right, I'm scared. Who knows, man?
It's crazy. But to be fair, we had a very nice Dare officer, like the police officer that we had. And I always make the joke that most of us failed him in life, but hey, it is here nor there, right? To each their own. But moving on with this story and the way it moves around. And like I said, there's so many layers, but it's all like in order. And just when you don't think it can get crazier, it gets crazier. Like you take the instant premise, you have a drug lord who's trying to manufacture a new brand of coke. Then you take the fact that they're going to bust him, so in a panic, let's dump it out into the hippopotamuses. They're going to go on a rampage. Oh, then we have a whole group of badass women assassins. and then you have the bumbling cops. Yeah. They're nuns, not to boot. They're nuns. I should have. How did I leave that out? Right? Yeah. Like, is there any point in juncture while you're just layering it on top? You're like, have we gone too far, or can we just keep pushing it further?
We did. Like, there was a moment where we had to have a sit down about rules of the world because it was getting too out there. So this isn't happening. But in the original version of the ending, the nuns transform and they combine into a mega nun. But then we decided that made no sense because they were supposed to be robots. The whole time they're supposed to be robots. And we're going to combine them together. And then we decided we couldn't do that because there needed to be rules. Otherwise, the jokes could come in from anywhere and it was less funny. It was like, oh, now we're making it wackier and weirder. So we did get rid of that. That was one of the instances where we were like, we have to have rules. So we came up with some rules for the story. The hippos talk. The hippos are all talking to each other all the time, but it's telepathic. But you only see the hippos talking when there's nobody else around, or if they're running in terror. Because otherwise you end up with a situation where you don't know if the hippos are talking to the people in like a Calvin and Hobbes situation. And we didn't want to have that happen with the hippos. So whenever the hippos are talking, it's because nobody else is listening. And they're not talking, they're communicating with each other. Those are really the only like really rules. We also like no swearing, no nudity, because we wanted to have a story that felt like those 1980s PG movies that are the most over-the-top, violent, insane things ever. But there's no swearing or nudity, so it's okay for kids to watch it. You know what I mean? Because don't you remember like seeing stuff like that? Like that was the way it was. And that era of cartoons, I think people forget that like how violent kids shows were at that time. If you go back and you watch like the Darkwing Duck premiere, okay? The Darkwing Duck from Disney. The first episode of Darkwing Duck, they have him on the ground and like fire a machine gun at him point blank and like, we killed him, boss. Like, and it's like, this is a Disney cartoon for kids. And then you take a look at what's on now and it's like, that wasn't even as bad as things got. You know what I mean? So we wanted things to fall into that bucket. We wanted it to have that 1980s, this is a family comedy kind of aesthetic. And some people will be like, yeah, but you got like women were running around in like bikinis shooting machine guns. Is that for kids? That was happening all the time. And our narrator, Nancy Reagan, comments about how salacious and unneeded this stuff is the entire time that's happening. So she's calling out what's happening on the page. So we built rules and we stuck to them very rigidly. And if things move along to more Laser Drug Force, we will follow the exact same rules that we've set up in this one.
That's awesome. And you know what? Like I when you're saying that, I envision, I'm like, that is the 1980s. It encapsulates it. It does actually go there because growing up, I try to remind, especially like my son and his friends, like when I was a kid growing up, like Gremlins was a kid's movie. Indiana Jones is technically a family movie. Need I remind you that those two movies are the reasons that the MPA started to move it to PG-13, because like there's what the witches, the Wiz, the Return of Oz, the Dark Crystal. I'm like, those were all kind of like nightmare fuels on the edge, and they were family, but children's cinema meant for you to watch them. Like, it's kind of wild and crazy that we went through all that. And then now it's like, oh, well, it's all like, it's like, no, when we were kids, those were things that we watched and our parents were like, here you go.
You have to watch Littlefoot's mom die. Like, you have to watch his mom die. And then he sits there crying was like next to her dead body while it rains. And the sharp tooth is going around killing more people. Like, that's what it was. Constant misery. I remember watching The Land Before Time in class with my teacher, Miss Sohern, smoking a dart in the back of the classroom like Edna Krabappel. And that's like legit. Like, I'm watching Atreyu try and drag Artax out of the mud as he's dying from the sadness. And my teacher's just having a dart in the back of the room. You're like, yeah, get ready, kids. It doesn't get any better than this. This is it. This is peak for you.
This is peak cinema. This is what you have. But it's crazy to think about those things, because now it's like there's no way there was a way. So it's perfect that made it into the book. So by independent comics, I said it at the beginning, big fan of indie comics. Obviously, the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre is an indie book. Our friends over at Mad Cave are putting it out there. As a fan of it right now, I say this all the time. You can find a different flavor, a different genre, things that aren't happening anywhere else in indie comics. And to me, that's a beautiful thing, because that's the spice of life, flavoring it up. What is your thoughts on the state of independent comics currently in the year 2026?
I think it's great. Like, and when you say like, what's the state? Like, are you talking about the state of like creativity? Because there's so many great titles out there. I mean, we always are hearing people talk about the oversaturation of the market, about how it was better like 15 years ago. Man, when Image blew up in the 90s, it was so crazy. People were making so much money. And it's like, you have to really accept the fact that things will never be as good as they were. because people do nothing but look back with rose-colored glasses, and they always have this idea that there was this golden time when things were amazing, but everybody at this golden time was complaining about the way things were, and they said that things were better before then too. So that is like the biggest thing that I could say about it. And I've been reading comics. I read comics a lot in junior high and high school, and then I sort of like fell off, and then in my mid-20s I got right back into it. And it was like Why the Last Man that really dragged me back into comics. And then once 100 Bullets fell into my hands, I was firmly reading constantly. And then there was other stuff like Rising Stars was a big book for me from J. Michael Straczynski. I really, really loved that book specifically. How every dude had long hair and wore a trench coat. It was so 90s. It was great. But there's so many great indie books out right now. Lost Fantasy is a book that I'm absolutely loving. My oldest, so you want kids, you can't tell them something's cool, they won't read it. You kind of got to like shape them into something, right? And so he's a huge Final Fantasy Dragon Warrior kid, and I told him like, oh, this guy Kurt Pierce, he used to work on Final Fantasy, you know that? And my son's like, oh, you did? I better check this out. And he looks at the cover and he's like, oh my god, it's just like Cloud Strife and his sword. I'm like, yeah, these are like lots of stuff. And then there's the scene with the Ocarina in there. And so I straight up lied to him about the book. And now he's like, it's like he can't stop. Like he's so obsessed with it. And now Firestorm, he's all into that as well. So like he's all into the like that Lost Fantasy verse. I was blown away by If Destruction Be Our Lot by Matt Rosenberg, which came out like last week, I think. And there's a panel in there, and I posted this on Blue Sky that really touches on exactly what I said. And it talks about how Abraham Lincoln, like the robot Abraham Lincoln, says, I feel like I was created to do something that doesn't exist anymore, but where does that leave me now? And I feel like that's a sentiment that like a lot of us can appreciate, that we're seeing the world change and the dreams that we had as kids of the things that we wanted to do don't exist. And there's really prolific things that you can find in indie comics these days that are amazing, like Exquisite Corpses. I mean, how can you argue that people aren't loving indie comics when you see Exquisite Corpses drop like just yesterday a game, like a card game that sells out within like 40 minutes, like is fully funded, like $1 gazillion. Like there's a hunger for something new. There's a hunger for something unique. And I'm really excited. Is Ted Okay is another fantastic story that feels like really on point. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but Joey Esposito has a new book coming out with IDW.
Oh, Killer Influence.
Yes.
Killer Influences. Yeah.
He said, have you read it?
Yeah, I read it. I did an early review for the FamilyZone.com website. So if you want to read my early review, go ahead. It's phenomenal.
Following it along, and just like I'm just like, oh, he's tied to like it's such a brilliant little concept, and it's such a cool little twist. Like there's so many good comics that are and speaking of Joey Esposito, The Pedestrian, man, like that was that book. When I read it, I was just like, oh my god, it's like it cuts to the core of being a hero. You know what I mean? It was such a brilliant book. It deserved that Eisner nod. Like it sort of came out of left field when it's like, this is an Eisner nominated book, but not to me, because when I read it, I remember reading it immediately being, this is good. It's just so good, you know? So there's loads of amazing indie books out there. I think there's a definite thirst for cool books that are coming out. Distillery did probably my favorite book in the last like 5 years. Blood Brothers Mother, which is like, as I said, I'm a huge Azzarello Risso fan. So like that was a home run for me. It's like a painted Risso book. Come on. I'm all over that, you know? So yeah, man, there's so many cool stories that are coming out there. It almost feels like there's just too many to like mention, you know what I mean? So, yeah. And I got to give a big plug to White Sky and Dork, because I feel like our book kind of like floated into the wake of those guys. And so the conversations have consistently been Dork, White Sky, and the Hippo book, you know? So it's like, I feel like they're like my buds. So I'm stoked. And is Ted okay as well? Because Dave Chisholm's a great dude. And we've really like been messaging back and forth. And I can't recommend that book enough because there's a lot of impotent anger that a lot of us feel a lot of the time. And that book really is like, that's for you. Like, that's for you right there.
Absolutely, huge fan of.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm a huge fan of all of them, but yeah, is Ted okay is tremendous. Like, but that's my point. Like, as somebody who grew up like you in the same time frame where you're like reading like mostly superhero books, like, and I understand there was other things, but that's when you got into it. Like to like then go into like other and your interest peak and stuff. But now in this day and age, it's like I can literally find anything: horror, comedy, things that don't even have a thing. I was saying the two biggest things that have jumped out lately at me are the horror comics because they're crushing them, and then true crime because that goes in like influences goes into that. There's this whole line of like true crime stuff coming out, and it's really good. And I was never, once again, I don't want the true crime podcast people to come after me, but I was never into like that like true crime stuff. But the comics are so damn good. And like, listen, I don't want to spoil anything. If you have not already reserved Killer Influences, I know we're plugging this, but make sure you get that because it's
absolutely
it's, like you said. I know this since you've read it. Like I don't want to give it away, but it's not a true crime book in the normal nature because they take away the things that usually make a true crime book. It's not a whodunit. You know who done it. It's step beyond that. It's tremendous. It's tremendous.
It's very clever, and it's such a clever shift and twist that I'm almost like angry about it. You know what I mean? I'm almost angry about it. But I love Joey so much. He's such a good dude. It's funny you bring up reading superhero comics because that's like all that I read growing up was just superhero comics. And it was always like there was the spinner rack at the 7-Eleven and you're hanging up by the Street Fighter machine and you're waiting for your turn because your quarter's on the deck and you're just reading comics the whole time. And it was like I would read anything that I thought looked cool. Like I loved Ghost Rider because he was cool, but everything with the Silver Surfer was like my favorite, especially like Ron Lim Silver Surfer is my friggin' jam. I'm a big Ron Lim fan, and that vibe that he drew to me, that was what I loved. And then when I got into like that nouveau indie comic thing, I feel like as a comic fan, it made me love comics even more. But as a writer, it made me worse. It made me way worse because I got in my head this idea that I needed to write this poignant examination of something else. And I miscued everything. And I wasn't making books that I wanted to read. I was making books that I thought would sell and be good. And they were stiff and unnatural. And it set me up on the wrong path. 100% set me up on the wrong path. Because if I could do anything, I'd be doing historical fiction comics. That's all I'd want to do is historical fiction comics. Like Bernard Cornwell is like my favorite writer. And like, oh, dude, I'd love to do that historical fiction stuff that he does, but I don't know if that's in the cards. There's no imprint that just focuses on historical fiction, unfortunately.
But you know what? Now I would say it's more of an open door than ever. There's so many different avenues, whether, you have publishers who are willing to take a gamble on things, if you will, throwing ideas out there because of all the genres. And also on top of that, you have Kickstarter, which, as you mentioned, when you see these things getting funded, like and I always I'm always impressed by sitting in this scene and talking to a bunch of creators who have done Kickstarters. And you see that like when they start doing them and they're like the lower amounts of paying and they get the funding, you're like, wow, that's amazing. Like it's one thing more than omnibus of something that like we all, hold in great regard, that the cheapest tier is like $70 when that gets funded. Great. I mean, I love that getting funded too, but it makes a little more sense. But like when people are taking like gambles on like these, like just out there ideas and indie books, it's tremendous. It's tremendous. And it's a big thing. So that's why I said, you never know. And it kind of ties into the question I was going to ask you next is I was going to say, we have the, some really good success. I hear a lot of buzz, and if I shout it to anybody about the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre that I can when I'm at the comic book shop, legitimately, like when somebody's like, what should I be reading? And I'm like, the list goes off. Is Ted okay is on that list? Is this is on the list? And I'm like, if you want to have fun, this is a fun book. It is a fun book. But what do you got down in the pike that you can talk about? You got something lined up? Is there something that you're looking forward to doing in the wake of all this?
Well, there's another arc for the Laser Drug Force that's queued up and on the tee and ready to go. We're just sort of like waiting for the paperwork, and then we're full bore into that one. I've got the rebooting the Samurai Pizza Cats, and I'm writing that, and that is like one of my favorite cartoons from the late 80s, early 90s. So I'm really and what's really cool about that one specifically is that I'm working on it with the creator of the cartoon in Japan from Tatsunoko. Like I'm working on that with him directly. So that's really cool. And just like I'm trying to get like some more IP work and stuff. I've got a massive project with Blizzard that's coming out very soon. That was just a beast to do, and Shannon Waters was my editor on that, and like I don't know if you Lumberjanes was awesome, and she's a fantastic editor to work with, so I'm very stoked to be working with her. But that's about it really right now. Like I've got some pitches and stuff that are out there, but if you're asking me if you're asking me to plug something that I did, I can. So
Go ahead.
I don't know if you've heard of Star Wars. Have you heard of Star Wars before?
I might have come across my radar once or
Yeah.
twice. I don't know. A little thing, right?
So my passion project that I did this a few years ago, and speak of exquisite corpses, Mike Walsh is in this. I did a radio play, a Star Wars radio play, a fan-made Star Wars radio play called Mud 79. And it focuses on a kid who, and this is like 5 years after the Empire becomes the Empire, like the Galactic Republic implodes and becomes the Empire. He grew up during the Clone Wars. His family fought for the Republic. And then when it becomes the Empire, he's like just some bumpkin on a planet in the middle of nowhere. He just wants off. He wants out. He wants to get out of his small town. He joins up and joins the Imperial Army. And he winds up on this planet that is slowly falling into a civil war. And it's like 30 episodes right now. And the cast is more than 120 people. And I haven't finished it yet. And I didn't finish it because I was sort of like waiting until my comic book writing stuff was sort of taking off a bit more. And then I was going to go back into it and finish writing it. It's all written. I just haven't produced it because production value takes a long time. So it's about 26 hours of audio play. Yeah. So I worked on it for around 2 years. And that's like my favorite thing that I've ever done. But like when you're like some guy pitching your Star Wars project, like nobody will like none of those Star Wars fan site will bring you on to talk about it at all, man. But it was like my favorite thing that I've ever worked on. Like I absolutely loved it because I love Star Wars, and it's basically Platoon meets Star Wars. It's a very unique, very different little take on a galaxy far, far away, man.
Yeah. Everybody check that out then. That sounds amazing to me. I'm going to check that out because
it's called Mud 79. That's what it's called. Mud 79. Because they're the 79th platoon and they're mud troopers. So they're Mud 79. Yeah. And my dad is the military. My dad is like a lifer. And like that era, like us growing up, we're of the era where our parents were in Vietnam or knew someone in Vietnam. And so we've got all those stories. And it's like, if you watched Ken Burns' Vietnam doc, that was a profound, like, this is just like Star Wars because George Lucas based Star Wars on Vietnam, you know? So it was like a real big circular thing. So yeah, that's my check this out. But don't take my word for it, you know?
Yeah, go check it out because that's the best. That's the best part about it. And I'm pretty sure everybody who's listening, maybe not everybody, but a good majority is a Star Wars fan. Myself included. So that makes all the sense in the world to go check it out. But I want to give you one more hot seat question before I get you out of here, and that is we're gonna tie it back in. I want to give this the clear thing. The lawsuits are not a thing. Contracts, copyright infringement's not a thing. If you could mix any property with the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre, bring them together. You know, we're in the age of the crossover. If you could cross over with any property and you could pick anything in media, what would you pick and why?
Oh, James Bond, 100%. Like 100% James Bond, because there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about, James and I, for other arcs and other ideas. But there was one specifically where we're never going to do this, so I can talk about it. But I wanted to do like a Moonraker-esque Florida hippopotamus with a laser drug force having to go to outer space was what I wanted to do. And we've kiboshed that idea because it would just like, it would make no sense, but it was so stupid and it was so funny to have James Bond-esque stuff in the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre. So James Bond, hands down, period. That's where it is. That's what I'm sticking with.
Well, as a Bond fan, I would enjoy that as well. So
yeah,
listen, go out. Make sure you grab a copy. I only have issue 1 here, but trust me, I have the other ones somewhere in my stack of comic books over here. So make sure you go out, grab it. Go check out those variant covers we talked about and that you saw on the graphics throughout the show. And make sure you support this because trust me, the Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre is a real fun read. You're not going to regret going to read it. And Fred, thank you so much for dropping by the Fan Light Zone. And you will have to have you back because I want to talk more about the Laser Drug Force and more about Star Wars and everything else. We'll definitely have to have you back on, man.
Absolutely, buddy. We can make that happen. I know a guy.
All right, awesome. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in for this edition of FLZ Presents. And I'm Rich, and I'll catch you later.
It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. 'Cause anyone who's worth a damn would be worth way more than a picture could ever show. You could find the right light, find the right angle, and never find your soul. And it can feel like a losing battle, and this plot is full of holes. This modern way of finding love just makes me feel so alone. And I can't be the only one sick of staring at my phone. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Don't know that I believe in the old time fable. Everyone has just one true love. All I know is you're across this table, and you're all I'm thinking of. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Talk to me. Talk to me. It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. Whoa.